I never imagined that the quietest day of my life would be the funeral of my husband, Robert. After 42 years of marriage, there I was, standing next to his coffin, when my phone vibrated with a terrifying message. I am alive. I am not the one in that coffin. I felt my world collapse. But before continuing, make sure you are subscribed to the channel and write in the comments where you are watching this video from. We love to know how far our stories reach. My name is Margaret Miller, and I am 66 years old. What I am about to tell changed my life forever. There are stories that break you into 1,000 pieces, and this is mine. The funeral of my husband Robert was the quietest day of my existence. 42 years of marriage reduced to a body in a coffin. I was standing by his grave, my legs barely holding me, when I felt my phone vibrating in the pocket of my only black dress. With trembling hands, I opened the message from an unknown number. The words I read froze my blood. I am alive. I am not the one in that coffin. My heart raced. I thought it was a cruel joke, some mistake. With trembling fingers I typed, I cannot understand. Where are you? The reply came immediately. I cannot say. They are watching me. Do not trust our sons. I lifted my eyes from the screen, my world collapsing like a sandcastle. I saw David and Michael, my own sons, standing on the other side of the coffin with strangely calm expressions. Something was wrong. Their tears seemed forced, their hugs as cold as the wind blowing through that cemetery. I remember the first time Robert spoke to me. It was a sunny Tuesday morning in Springfield, our little town. I was walking to the market in my faded green dress, carrying an empty basket I would fill with the little I could buy to feed my sick mother. He came out of his small bicycle shop with his hands stained with grease and smiled at me with a shyness that melted my heart instantly. "Good morning, Margaret," he said softly. "Do you need me to take a look at your bike?" I didn't have a bicycle, but I invented an excuse just to be able to talk to him. That simple moment turned into meetings under the big fig tree in the square, then into promises of eternal love, and finally into a modest wedding full of hope. The first years were difficult. We lived in a 2-room house with a tin roof that leaked when it rained. Robert worked from sunrise to sunset in his workshop, and I sewed clothes for the women of the town. When David was born, I felt a happiness I thought impossible. He was a perfect baby with his father's big eyes. 2 years later, Michael arrived, just as beautiful. I raised them with all the love in the world, sacrificing my own needs for theirs. Robert was a wonderful father. He took them fishing at the river on Sundays, taught them how to fix things with their hands, and told them stories before bedtime. We were a close family, or so I believed. As the years went by, things began to change. David, the eldest, was always ambitious. From a young age, he questioned why we lived so modestly, why we didn't have a car like other families. Michael followed him in everything, as he always did. When David turned 18, Robert offered him a job in the workshop, but he rejected it with contempt. "I don't want to get my hands dirty like you, Dad. I'm going to be someone important." Those words deeply hurt Robert. I would see him at night on the porch, looking at the stars with a sadness he tried to hide from me. His son had rejected not only his work, but his entire way of life. The years passed, and David managed to make a name for himself in the world of real estate in Chicago. Michael followed shortly after. Both began to earn money, much more than Robert and I had ever seen. At first, I was proud. My sons had escaped poverty, but little by little that joy turned into sadness. The visits became less frequent, the phone calls shorter. When they came, they arrived in expensive cars, wearing elegant suits, talking about investments and properties. They looked at our humble house with a strange mix of pity and shame. "Mom," David said to me during a visit, "you should move to a better place. This house is falling apart." He was right, but that house held all our memories. It was there that we raised our children, where we shared thousands of meals, where we grew old together. It was not luxurious, but it was our home. Robert, always wise, told me, "Margaret, money changed our sons. We are no longer enough for them." I resisted believing it. I kept justifying their absences, their brief calls, their broken promises. "They are busy building their lives," I repeated to myself. "Someday they will return to being the loving children we raised." But in my heart, I knew Robert was right. We lost our sons long before I lost my husband, only I did not know to what extent they had become strangers to us. The most drastic change came when David married Jessica Carter, a city woman who never hid her disdain for our simple way of life. The first time he brought her home, she arrived in high heels that sank into the dirt of our porch and an elegant red dress that seemed more expensive than everything I had ever owned. "Nice to meet you," she said with a forced smile, extending only the tips of her fingers to greet me. Her eyes scanned our humble home with an expression that made me feel small. During dinner, she barely touched the food I had prepared with so much love. David seemed nervous, constantly apologizing for things that had never embarrassed him before. "Next time we'll take them to a restaurant," he whispered to Jessica, thinking I could not hear. But I did, and each word pierced my heart like a knife. Michael remained single, but adopted the same distant attitude as his brother. His visits were limited to special occasions, and even then, he always seemed in a hurry to leave, constantly on his phone closing deals. Family Sundays became a distant memory. Christmas turned cold and formal. My sons brought expensive gifts we did not need. They stayed for only a few hours and then left with visible relief. Robert and I grew old alone, consoling each other. He continued working in his workshop, although his hands no longer had the same strength. I kept on with my sewing, but my eyes were no longer the same. We lived on our small pension, proud not to ask anything from our successful sons. "Do you know what the saddest part is, Margaret?" Robert told me one night as we drank coffee on the porch. "It's not that they have money. It's that money made them believe we are no longer important." Things got worse when David bought a $200,000 house in an exclusive neighborhood in Chicago. Michael followed his example by investing in a luxury condominium that cost $150,000. Suddenly, our sons owned fortunes we could not even imagine. "You should sell this house and move to a retirement community," suggested Jessica during a visit. "There are very nice places for people your age." The word community hit me like a slap. A retirement community after 40 years of building our home. They wanted to send us to a nursing home. "We don't need a nursing home," Robert answered with dignity. "We are fine here in our house." But I saw the expression on David's and Michael's faces. They supported Jessica's idea. To them, we were a burden, a problem to be solved in the most convenient way. That was when the more direct suggestions began. One day, David arrived with papers in his hand, documents he had prepared without consulting us. "Dad, Mom," he said with that fake smile he had perfected. "I've been thinking about your future. This house is worth, at most, $1,000. If you sell it, I can add some money so you can move to a better place." For us, there was no better place than the home where we had been happy for decades. But David did not understand that. For David, everything came down to monetary values. He continued, "I think Dad should retire from the workshop. He is already 70 years old. It is time to rest." Robert looked at him with infinite sadness. "Son, working is not a burden for me. It is what keeps me alive, what gives meaning to my days." "But you could get hurt," Michael insisted. "At your age, an accident would be very dangerous." His words sounded caring, but I felt something else behind them, impatience, an urgency I could not fully understand. The following months were tense. My sons increased the pressure for us to sell the house. They brought real estate agents without warning us. They had the property appraised without our permission. During one particularly uncomfortable dinner, David told us, "Jessica and I have decided to have children soon. We are going to need help with the expenses. If you sell the house and move to a smaller place, that money could be an early inheritance." An early inheritance. He was asking for our inheritance while we were still alive. The audacity of the request left me speechless. Robert remained calm, but I saw his jaw tighten. "Son, when your mother and I die, everything we have will be yours, but as long as we are alive, our decisions are ours." "Don't be stubborn," Michael interrupted with a harshness I had never seen in him before. "You are already old. You cannot keep living in the past." That night, after they left, Robert and I talked until dawn. For the first time in our marriage, we discussed the possibility that our sons were not the people we believed we had raised. "Something is wrong, Margaret," my husband said with a concern I had never seen in his eyes. "This is not just ambition or impatience. there is something darker behind all this pressure. I had no idea how deeply right his words were. The last normal conversation I had with David was 3 weeks before Robert's death. He came alone, without Jessica, and seemed more serious than usual. "Mom," David said as he hugged me, "Dad is in bad shape. The doctors say one of the machines in the workshop exploded. He has severe burns and a traumatic brain injury." Michael's eyes were red, but something in his expression seemed strange. He looked more nervous than sad, like someone waiting for important news rather than someone suffering for his father. When I entered that intensive care room, my heart sank. Robert was connected to a dozen machines, with bandages covering most of his face and arms. I barely recognized him. His breathing was labored, sustained by devices that beeped constantly. I moved closer to his bed and took his hand, the only part of his body that seemed untouched. "Robert, my love, I am here. Everything will be fine. You will recover like you always do." For a moment, I felt a faint squeeze of my hand. His eyes moved behind his closed eyelids. He was fighting. My warrior was fighting to return to me. The next 3 days were the longest of my life. I practically lived in the hospital, sleeping in the uncomfortable chairs of the waiting room. David and Michael took turns staying with me, but they always seemed more interested in speaking with the doctors than in comforting their father. I overheard fragments of conversations that I did not fully understand at the time. Michael was asking about health insurance, about the cost of treatment. David was on the phone talking about life insurance policies and beneficiaries. "Mom," David told me on the second day, "we checked Dad's insurance. He has a $50,000 policy. There is also a workplace accident policy that could cover up to $5,000 more." Why was he talking about money when Robert was still fighting for his life? Why was he worried about insurance instead of his father's recovery? "I don't care about the money," I replied sharply. "I just want your father to recover." "Of course, Mom," David said, but I saw something in his eyes I didn't like, a coldness, as if he were calculating while his father was dying. On a third day, the doctors gave us the most devastating news of my life. Dr. Stevens gathered us in the small office. "Mrs. Miller, your husband's condition is critical. The burns have become infected, and the brain trauma is more serious than we initially thought. We need to be realistic about his chances." "What does that mean?" I asked, though my heart already knew the answer. "It means we need to prepare for the worst. Your husband is in an induced coma. We could keep him alive indefinitely, but the chances of him regaining consciousness are highly unlikely." My world collapsed. 42 years of marriage, a lifetime built together, and now they were telling me that everything was fading like smoke. "We want to try everything," I said through sobs. "No matter the cost, no matter how long it takes." But David exchanged a look with Michael that disturbed me deeply. "Mom," David said in a voice trying to sound understanding, "we have to be practical. Dad wouldn't want to live like this. He always said he never wanted to be a burden on anyone." "A burden?" I exploded with a fury I didn't know I had. "He is your father, not a burden. He is the man who raised you, who worked his entire life to give you the best he could." "We know, Mom," Michael cut in, "but we also have to think of you. The medical bills will be enormous. They could wipe out all your savings." Again, money, always money. My husband was dying, and they were calculating costs. That night, alone in the hospital room, I held Robert's hand and spoke to him as if he could hear me. "My love, I don't know what to do. The doctors say there is no hope, but I cannot let you go. I cannot imagine my life without you." Then something happened that still gives me chills. His fingers moved slightly, squeezing mine with an almost imperceptible force. His lips moved as if trying to say something, but no sound came out. I called the nurses desperately. "He is reacting. He is trying to speak." But when they arrived, Robert had returned to his previous state. The nurse checked the monitors and shook her head. "Sometimes there are involuntary muscle spasms, ma'am. It doesn't mean he is conscious." But I knew what I had felt. Robert had tried to communicate with me. He had struggled to tell me something important. 2 days later, in the early hours of the morning, the alarms of the machine sounded, the lights flashed, and the nurses ran to Robert's room. I was dozing in the hallway when the noise woke me up. No! 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 I screamed, running toward the room. The doctors worked for 40 minutes trying to resuscitate him, but it was useless. At 4:37 in the morning, Robert was officially declared dead. The pain I felt at that moment was physical, as if my heart had been ripped from my chest. I collapsed beside his bed, hugging his still warm body, refusing to accept that he was gone forever. David and Michael arrived at the hospital an hour after their father's death. They seemed prepared, as if they had been waiting for the call. They brought papers, documents, and phone numbers of funeral homes. "We already spoke with the funeral home in Springfield," David told me while I was still crying inconsolably. "They can pick up the body this morning." "We also contacted the insurance," Michael added. "The claim process is already underway." "Mom," he told me, sitting at the kitchen table where he had eaten breakfast so many times as a child, "I want you to know that no matter what happens, Michael and I will always take care of you." His words reassured me at that moment, but now, remembering them beside Robert's grave, they gave me chills. Why did he say no matter what happens? What did he know that I didn't? The accident that changed everything happened on a Tuesday morning. Robert had left early for the workshop, as he had done every day for more than 40 years. I was in the kitchen preparing his favorite lunch when the phone rang with an urgency that sent shivers down my spine. "Mrs. Miller?" asked an unfamiliar voice. "I am calling from Chicago General Hospital. Your husband suffered a serious accident. You must come immediately." The words swirled in my mind. The world stopped. My legs felt like jelly, and I had to hold on to the doorframe to keep from falling. My neighbor, Mrs. Linda Johnson, drove me to the hospital because I was trembling so much I could barely hold the keys. On the way, my mind refused to process what was happening. Robert was careful, meticulous in his work. How could this have happened? When we arrived, David and Michael were already there. That surprised me because no one had notified them yet, at least not me. But in my desperation, I paid no attention to that detail. How could they be so efficient, so organized, so cold just 1 hour after losing their father? Something was wrong, but my grief was so intense that I could not think clearly. The funeral was scheduled for the following Monday. David took charge of all the arrangements without really consulting me. He chose the simplest casket, the shortest service, as if he wanted to finish everything as quickly as possible. "It's what Dad would have wanted," he said when I complained about not being included in the decisions. "Something simple, without fuss." But Robert deserved better than that indecent rush to bury him and forget him. The day of the funeral arrived cloudy and cold, as if the very sky were crying for him. I put on my only black dress, the same one I had worn at my mother's funeral years earlier. My hands trembled so much that Mrs. Linda Johnson had to help me button the tiny buttons on the back. "Be strong, Margaret," whispered my dear friend as she carefully combed my hair. "Robert would want to see you strong." But I did not feel strong. I felt empty, like a shell without a soul. 42 years of marriage cannot be buried so easily. Every object in the house reminded me of him: his coffee cup on the table, his tools on the porch, his pillow that still held his scent. When we arrived at the cemetery, I was surprised at how few people attended. I had expected to see more of Robert's coworkers, more neighbors, more acquaintances, but it was only David, Michael, Jessica, Mrs. Johnson, me, and Pastor Williams. "Where are the guys from the workshop?" I asked David. "We didn't want to bother anyone," he answered quickly. Dad was a private person. He would have preferred something intimate. But that wasn't true. Robert loved his community. He cared about his neighbors. He would have wanted them to come and say goodbye. Why had David decided to make everything so secretive, so rushed? During the service, I observed my sons with a strange emotional detachment. David kept a solemn expression appropriate for the occasion, but his eyes constantly strayed to the clock. Michael seemed restless, as if he had more important things to do. Jessica discreetly checked her phone behind her black veil. That was how they said goodbye to their father, with impatience and distractions. When it came time to throw dirt on the coffin, my legs refused to hold me. Mrs. Johnson had to support me as I sobbed uncontrollably. The sound of the dirt hitting the wood was final, conclusive, hopeless. At that very moment, standing by the grave, my phone vibrated. A text message from an unknown number. "I am alive. I am not the one in that coffin." My heart stopped. The letters danced before my eyes as if I were hallucinating. I was going mad with grief. With trembling hands, I replied, "Who are you?" The reply came immediately. "I cannot say. They are watching me. Do not trust our sons." The phone slipped from my hands as if it burned me. Mrs. Johnson bent down to pick it up, but I stopped her abruptly. I could not let anyone else see those messages, not until I understood what was happening. "Are you okay, Mom?" David asked, approaching me with a concerned expression. I looked at him, trying to find some clue in his face. His eyes seemed sincere, but now every gesture, every word, every expression seemed suspicious to me. "I'm fine," I lied, putting the phone back in my purse. "I just need to go home." On the way back, I could not get those messages out of my head. Was it possible someone was playing a cruel joke at the worst moment of my life? Or was there really the possibility that Robert was alive? But if he was alive, who had we buried? That night, alone in my house, which now felt like a tomb, I went over every detail of the past days. Robert's accident had been strange from the start. According to David, a machine had exploded in the workshop, but Robert knew every bolt in that place. He was meticulous with maintenance, obsessive with safety. And how had my sons arrived at the hospital so quickly if no one had notified them? The hospital had called me first. I was the emergency contact. How did they know about the accident before I did? And then there was the money. From the first day, David and Michael had spoken about insurance policies and beneficiaries, as if they had been waiting for that moment, preparing for it. I decided to review Robert's papers. In his old wooden desk, he kept all important documents in a metal box. I found the $50,000 life insurance policy David had mentioned, but there was something I did not remember. The policy had been updated only 6 months earlier, raising the coverage from $5,000 to $50,000. Why had Robert increased his life insurance? He had never mentioned that change to me. And more importantly, who had suggested he do it? I kept searching and found something even more disturbing. A workplace accident insurance policy I didn't know about, purchased only 2 months before his death. $5,000 in case of accidental death at work. A fortune for a family like ours, but also tempting enough for someone without scruples. My phone vibrated again, another message from the same unknown number. "Check the bank account. See who has been moving money." This time, I did not hesitate. Whoever this person was, they knew too much to be a prankster. They knew about the insurance. They knew about my sons. They knew details only someone very close to us could know. The next day, I went to the bank where Robert and I had kept our account for 30 years. Mrs. Karen Thompson, the manager who had known us for years, greeted me with sincere condolences. "Mrs. Miller, I am very sorry about Robert. He was a good man." "Thank you, Mrs. Thompson. I came to review our accounts. I need to understand our financial situation." She showed me the account statements from the last 6 months. What I saw froze my blood. In the last 3 months, large withdrawals had been made from our savings account. In January, $3,000. In February, $4,000. In March, other considerable sums. Money I did not know had been taken. "Who authorized these withdrawals?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Your husband came in personally," Mrs. Thompson explained. "He said he needed the money for repairs in the workshop. But I managed the household accounts. I knew exactly how much money we had and how we spent it." Robert had never mentioned costly repairs in the workshop. "Do you have the signatures for those withdrawals?" I asked. Mrs. Thompson showed me the receipts. Indeed, it looked like Robert's signature, but something in the handwriting seemed strange. It was too shaky, too uncertain for his writing, which was usually firm and clear. "Mrs. Thompson," I asked with my heart pounding, "did he come alone to make these withdrawals, or was someone with him? She thought for a moment. Now that you mention it, I believe he came with one of his sons once or twice. David, I think. He said he was helping his father with the paperwork because Robert had trouble reading documents without his glasses. David, my son, had been involved in withdrawals I knew nothing about, using his father's tired eyes as an excuse. But Robert could see perfectly well with his glasses, which he never took off during the day. That afternoon, as I stared at the bank receipts over and over, I received another message. The insurance was their idea. They convinced Robert he needed more protection for you. It was a trap. I could no longer deny the evidence piling up. The mysteriously increased insurance policies, the unauthorized withdrawals, David's presence in transactions I did not know about, his suspicious efficiency in organizing the funeral, his coldness during his father's agony. But the terrifying question was whether they had truly planned Robert's death, how they had done it, and who was sending me these messages. The following days became a nightmare of doubt and suspicion. Every smile from David, every hug from Michael, every word of condolence seemed like a mask hiding something sinister. But I needed more proof before accepting such a horrible truth. My phone continued to receive messages from the mysterious number. Go to Robert's workshop, look in his desk. There are things you have not seen. I decided to go to the workshop for the first time since the accident. David had said a machine had exploded, but when I got there, I found something completely different from what I expected. The workshop was strangely clean. Too clean to have been the scene of an explosion. There were no burn marks on the walls, no debris, no signs of the destruction such a serious accident should have caused. Where is the machine that exploded? I asked aloud, examining the place. Every machine was in its place, working perfectly. The welder, the compressor, the electric saw, all intact. So what had been the cause of the accident? On Robert's desk, I found something that gave me chills. A note written in his handwriting, dated 3 days before his death. David insists that I need more insurance. He says it is for Margaret, but something doesn't feel right. I don't trust his intentions. Under that note was another. Michael brought me papers to sign. He says it is to modernize the workshop, but I don't understand what it is about. Why the rush? My husband had suspected. He had sensed our son's bad intentions, but he died before he could tell me. I kept searching and found a sealed envelope with my name on it. I opened it with trembling hands. It was a letter from Robert. My dear Margaret, if you are reading this, it means something has happened to me. In the past months, I have noticed strange changes in David and Michael. They are very interested in our money, in the insurance, in selling the house. Jessica is putting a lot of pressure on them. Yesterday, David told me I should worry more about my safety, because at my age, any accident could be fatal. I don't know why, but those words sounded like a threat. I love you, Margaret. If something happens to me, don't trust anyone blindly, not even our sons. The letter slipped from my hands. Robert had foreseen his own death. He had seen the signs that I, blinded by maternal love, had ignored. That night, David came to visit me. He arrived with a bottle of wine and a smile that now seemed completely false. Mom, I've been thinking about your future, he said, pouring himself a glass without asking if I wanted one. The insurance money is already being processed. It will be $125,000. How do you know the exact amount? I asked, feigning innocence. Well, I helped Dad with the insurance paperwork. He wanted to make sure you would have enough money to live comfortably. A lie. Robert never wanted to increase the insurance. According to his own note, he had been pressured by David. And what do you think I should do with that money? I asked, watching his reaction carefully. His eyes lit up with a gleam that gave me chills. You could buy a smaller, cozier house, or better yet, move to a nice retirement community where you would have company and medical care. Michael and I could manage your money to make it go further. Manage my money. The audacity. We just want to take care of you, Mom. At your age, it's easy to be deceived or to make bad financial decisions. We know about investments, about business. We could triple that amount in a few years. Let me think about it, I said, trying to buy time. Of course, he replied with his false sweetness, but don't take too long, for your own good. After he left, I sat in the kitchen trembling with rage and fear. My own sons had not only murdered their father, but now they were planning to steal everything I had left. That night, my phone vibrated with a message longer than the previous ones. Margaret, I am Mark Stevens, a private investigator. Robert hired me 3 weeks before he died because he didn't trust David and Michael. They poisoned him with methanol mixed into his morning coffee. I have audio evidence of their conversations, planning everything. Tomorrow at 3 p.m, go to the cafe on the corner. Sit at the table in the back. I will be there. At last I would know who had been sending me those messages. And, more importantly, I would have the proof necessary to obtain justice for my husband's death. But I also knew I did not have much time. David and Michael had revealed their intentions. If I didn't act quickly, I would end up locked away in a nursing home while they spent the money that it cost Robert his life. The war had begun, and, although I was a 66-year-old woman against 2 ruthless men, I had something they did not. The truth. And the truth, sooner or later, always finds a way to come to light. The following day arrived full of nerves and expectation. I dressed carefully, choosing my most serious purple dress. At 2:30 p.m, I walked toward the cafe with firm but cautious steps. Every shadow seemed suspicious. Every person on the street could have been a spy sent by my sons. The cafe was moderately full. I went straight to the table in the back, as I had been instructed. I ordered a chamomile tea and waited, my hands trembling slightly on the worn wooden table. Exactly at 3 o'clock, a man of about 50 approached my table. He was tall, with graying hair, intelligent eyes, and a serious but kind expression. He carried a brown folder under his arm. "Mrs. Miller?" he asked in a low voice. I nodded, still not trusting my own voice. "I am Mark Stevens. I'm sorry for your loss. Robert was a good man." He sat down and placed the folder on the table. "Before I show you what I have, you need to know that what you are about to hear and see will be very painful. Are you ready?" "I have been preparing since I received your first message," I answered with the firmness I didn't know I had. Mark opened the folder and took out a small voice recorder. "Robert came to see me a month ago. He was worried about his son's behavior. He hired me to investigate them discreetly." He pressed the play button. Robert's voice, so familiar and dear, filled the small space between us. "Mark, I need you to know that if something happens to me, it will not be an accident. David and Michael have been pressuring me to increase my life insurance. Yesterday, David brought me papers. He said it was to protect Margaret better, but when I read them, I realized there were also clauses that benefited them directly." My heart raced. Hearing Robert's voice was like having him back for a few minutes, but his words confirmed my worst suspicions. The recording continued. "Michael has been asking strange questions about my daily routine. What do I eat for breakfast? At what time do I leave home if Margaret comes with me to the workshop? He says it is out of concern, but something in the way he asks unsettles me." Mark paused the recording. "This conversation was 3 weeks before his death, but I have something more recent." He played another recording, this time with David's voice on the phone. "No, we can't wait any longer. The old man is starting to suspect. Yesterday, he asked me why I was so interested in his insurance. Yes, I already have the methanol. It works perfectly because the symptoms look like a heart attack or a stroke. No, Mother won't be a problem. After Dad dies, she will be so devastated that we can do whatever we want with her." Tears began rolling down my face. It was my son's voice, my own son, coldly planning his father's murder. "There is more," Mark said softly. "This recording is from the day before Robert's death." A new recording began. This time, it was Michael speaking with someone. "Everything is ready. Tomorrow, David will put the methanol in Dad's coffee. We told him it was a special vitamin supplement that a doctor recommended. The fool will drink it without suspecting anything. The symptoms will start with dizziness and confusion, then loss of vision, convulsions, coma. The doctors will think it's a stroke or a heart attack, and by the time they realize it's poisoning, it will be too late. My world completely collapsed. Not only had they planned Robert's murder, but they carried it out with a coldness that terrified me. How could my sons, the babies I nursed, the children I comforted in their nightmares, be capable of something so monstrous? How did you get these recordings? I asked through sobs. Robert asked me to place listening devices in this house, Mark explained. He was afraid, but he didn't know exactly of what. He pulled a series of photographs from the folder. I also have this. David buying methanol at a hardware store 30 minutes from town. He paid in cash and used a false name, but I have it on video. The photographs clearly show David leaving a store with a small bottle in his hands. The date on the photos was 5 days before Robert's death. And this, Mark continued, showing me more documents. These are David's and Michael's financial records from the last 6 months. They have been spending much more money than their income justifies. David owes $70,000 to a lender in the city. Michael has gambling debts of $40,000. Everything began to make sense. It wasn't just greed that motivated Robert's murder. It was financial desperation. My sons were ruined and saw their father as a source of quick and easy money. Why didn't you go to the police immediately after Robert's death? I asked. Because David and Michael are very clever. Mark replied. They bribed the doctor who treated Robert at the hospital to change the official diagnosis. Instead of poisoning, the death certificate says heart failure due to complications from a workplace accident. Without that medical evidence, my recordings wouldn't have been enough for a conviction. But now, we have all the proof together. Exactly, I said, feeling a mix of pain and determination. And there is one more thing you need to know. My blood ran cold. What? Mark played one last recording with the voices of David and Michael together. After we get Dad's insurance money, we also have to get rid of Mom, David said. We can't risk her suspecting or someone putting ideas in her head. How? Michael asked. The same as with Dad, but this time we can make it look like a suicide from depression. A widow who can't live without her husband, no one would question it. And with the money, we would be the only heirs. Everything would be ours. The house, the savings, the insurance money, almost $200,000 in total. The recording stopped. I was trembling uncontrollably. My sons had not only murdered their father, they were also planning to murder me. All for money. Mrs. Miller, Mark said softly, I know this is devastating, but we have enough evidence to make them pay for what they did. What do we do now? I asked, drying my tears. First, we need to go to the police with all this evidence. Sergeant Harris is an honest man, not involved in corruption. Second, we must act quickly. Your sons are planning to have you declared mentally incompetent tomorrow. How do you know that? I intercepted a phone call this morning. They are meeting with Judge Anderson at 10 o'clock to begin the process of declaring you incapacitated. I stood up with a determination I had not felt in weeks. Then we must act tonight. That same night, Mark and I went directly to the police station. Sergeant Harris was on the night shift, which was perfect for our purposes. When we arrived, I presented all the evidence. The audio recordings, the photographs of David buying methanol, the bank documents showing unauthorized withdrawals, Robert's medical results proving his perfect health, and finally, the recorded conversations where my sons confessed both to murdering their father and planning to kill me. The sergeant listened to each recording with an increasingly serious expression. This is monstrous, he murmured when we finished. Are you sure you want to go through with this? Once we arrest your sons, there is no turning back. Sergeant, I replied with all the dignity I could gather. Those men murdered my husband in cold blood for money. They were planning to murder me as well. They are no longer my sons. They are criminals who must pay for their crimes. 3 months later, the trial began. The courtroom was packed. Reporters from several regional newspapers came to cover what was already known as the case of the killer sons. The evidence was irrefutable. The recordings didn't lie. The bank documents didn't lie. The forensic evidence of methanol in Robert's exhumed body didn't lie either. When it was my turn to testify, I walked to the stand with trembling legs but a clear mind. "Mrs. Miller," the prosecutor asked me, "can you tell us what your relationship with your sons was like before your husband's murder?" "I thought I had a good relationship with them," I replied, looking directly at David and Michael. "I raised them with love. I sacrificed everything for their well-being. Their father worked from dawn to dusk to give them the best we could. I never imagined that love and sacrifice would become the reason for his murder." The jury deliberated for only 6 hours. When they returned, the silence in the courtroom was absolute. I could hear the beating of my own heart as the judge read the verdict. In the case of the state versus David Miller and Michael Miller, on the charge of first-degree murder of Robert Miller, we find the defendants guilty. David collapsed in his chair. Michael remained rigid, staring straight ahead without expression. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder against Mrs. Margaret Miller, we find the defendants guilty. Judge Anderson immediately proceeded to sentencing. "David Miller and Michael Miller, for the premeditated murder of your father and the conspiracy to murder your mother, I sentence you to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole for 30 years. When I heard those words, I felt a gigantic weight lift from my shoulders. Justice. Finally, there was justice for Robert. Today, 2 years after the trial, I live peacefully in my small house. I turned Robert's workshop into a garden where I grow flowers to take to his grave every Sunday. Mark has become a close friend, visiting me regularly to make sure I'm doing well. Sometimes the neighbors ask me if I miss my sons. The answer is complicated. I miss the children they once were, but those children died long before Robert. The men they became were not my sons. They were strangers who shared my blood, but not my heart. I have learned that true family is not defined by blood, but by love, loyalty, and mutual respect. Robert was my true family for 42 years. The friends who supported me during the trial are my family now. Justice did not bring Robert back, but it gave me peace. And on quiet nights, when I sit on the porch where we so often drink coffee together, I swear I can feel his presence, proud of me for being strong enough to do what was right, even if it meant losing my sons forever. 5 years after that terrible day at the cemetery, I founded the Robert Miller Foundation for Victims of Family Crimes, using the insurance money to help other people who have gone through similar tragedies. No amount of money could bring my husband back, but every person we help is a small victory against the darkness that almost consumed me. As I told a young woman who came seeking help last week, family is not an excuse for crime. Love with boundaries is true love, and it is never too late to seek justice, no matter who the guilty party is. Now, if you enjoyed this story, click on the next video appearing on your screen, because in it, there is a story of betrayal and twist like you've never seen before.